Chapter 216. 1. Submit to me, and you'll ascend to ninth heavens with desire. Who dares to show interest in the young lady she has already set her eyes on? That's absolutely unforgivable. But isn't that young lady Qingyu? Ever since she and Lu Junyao came out from the fleeting cloud fortress, after they managed to find a way out, Lu Junyao had used the reason that her wounds have not fully healed, and said that as Qing Tianlin was still looking for her, returning back to the faint mist sect, so rashly would only expose herself. So he had brought her back to the gathered cloud loft to hide for a period. The construct of the place was special, equipped with a high-level cloaking array from cloud heaven. Once that was activated, it would be impossible to find the place, and hence this would be the safest place to be at. But staying cooped up inside all the time would be torturous, and hence she had come to the fragrance court today. She had been a frequent patron of the place, just 2 years ago, and she had not come here for quite a long time. But she had come here cross-dressed as a man back then, and this was her first time entering the place in female clothes. But it was fortunate that she was not dressed as a guy, as the ladies in here were all just too passionate, and she might very well have been swallowed alive by all of them. Never had she thought that she would still catch someone's eye. My humble name is Jiang Shanglin. I wonder if I may have the honor of gaining your lady's acquaintance? As the voice of a young man rang out over her head, someone suddenly sat down in the seat beside her. Qingyu's brows knitted together. I see that the young miss is alone. Can I sit here? It was a suave man with a fitting smile on his face, gentle and elegant, but not showing up as being overly frivolous, seeming highly approachable, and his moves methodical, maintaining a good grasp of the himself. But what a pity. He picked the wrong target this time. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qingyu had always disliked strangers coming too close to her, especially ones that tried to get close unsolicited like this. Regardless of how well the man was able to control the expression on his face, the glint of debauchery and lust in his eyes showed that he was not as harmless as he presented himself to be on the surface. Qingyu's eyes turned sharp. Already plopped himself down, and he was still asking her whether he can sit? What a boorish way of picking up a girl. He probably thinks that she was some naive young girl who was ignorant about the ways of the world. Indeed, compared to the other people in here, she did look a lot more innocent and gullible, as she was much younger after all. At such a close proximity, Jiang Shanglin then discovered that the young lady who had caught his eye earlier actually had such outstandingly good looks that was in no way inferior to any of the ladies here in Fragrance Court. And there was even a certain languid and elegant beauty in those eyes that was exceptionally alluring. Chapter 216. 2. Submit to me, and you'll ascend to ninth heavens with desire. Truly a rare and exceptional treasure. Jiang Shanglin almost could not rein in the beast in his heart, but this was after all the Fragrance Court, and he could not possibly do anything too outrageous in here. He would have to think of a way to coax the young lady out of the place. I guess this must be the young miss' first time here in Fragrance Court. You might not be aware, but this isn't a place that young maidens like you should come to. If you happen to meet anyone with nefarious intentions against you, how dangerous is it for you to be all alone out here on your own? Jiang Shanglin said with great concern. Qingyu almost could not contain her laughter. This man has got to be joking, isn't he? Isn't he the one with nefarious intentions towards her right here? How could he still have the cheek to be saying all this now? It's really quite an eye-opener, isn't it? But she had never been someone with the patience to deal with hypocrites like this. A corner of her lips twitched, and just one single word rolled out from her lips. Scram. Jiang Shanglin, who had been thinking that the young lady was a rather tough nut to crack, suddenly froze when he heard that one word. She had actually said scram? Oh, this is getting rather interesting. She's actually a feisty and spicy little chili, isn't she? But that's what he really likes. The smile on Jiang Shanglin's face deepened, feeling rather aroused. He leaned in closer to that exquisitely beautiful face, almost about to stick himself onto the young lady's body. Come on, don't be so cold, will you? For you to have come to a place like this, you wouldn't really be all that decent yourself. How could the gigolos in the Fragrance Court know how to serve you better than I can? I guarantee that I can make you Arg, those vulgar words suddenly halted, accompanied by a pitiful wail. Even Lu Ji, who had been watching their interaction from a short distance away, could not help but be stunned in place. The alluring and beautiful young lady's slender and pretty fingers had picked up the teapot on the table. There was about a little more than half a pot of tea left inside, which was still steaming hot as it had been freshly brewed just a little while ago. And it was poured right over the head of the man who was leaning his face in close to her while licking his lips. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Although the temperature of the tea was no longer piping hot as before, it still scalded the man's rather good-looking face enough to turn the skin on his face thoroughly red, causing the expression on his face to turn rather amusing. Pfft! Lu Ji could not contain herself, and laughter escaped through her lips. Seeing the young lady's actions, she grew to like her even more, thinking that she possessed an indescribably commanding air. You! Jiang Shanglin's face turned from red to green with anger, his finger trembling visibly as he pointed it straight at Qingyu, seemingly seething with rage. Qingyu's face had an unreadable smile as she released the grip on her hand. The high-grade Celadone porcelain teapot fell with a thud onto the man's outstretched finger, before landing firmly on the tabletop. Chapter 216. 3. Submit to me, and you'll ascend to ninth heavens with desire, even though it was empty at that moment. But the teapot was still rather heavy by itself, so it was not a light hit. The man could not help but wince in pain, and his face turned an uglier shade. Qingyu arched an eyebrow up, and her voice was melodious as she asked, "Are you awake now?" Jiang Shanglin's body shook with barely contained rage. "Do you know who I am? How dare you offend me like this? Why would I care who you are?" Qingyu curved her eyes into crescents, though the smile did not show inside. "I told you to scram. If you had obediently taken your sorry behind out of here, nothing would have happened. But you just had to continue prattling on before my face, which got on my nerves." How irritating. Came out for a breath of fresh air after being cooped up for so long, and one just had to run into such a character. Qingyu was suddenly feeling a little vexed, and she stood up, wanting to leave the place. But several armored figures suddenly surged in around her, men who seemed to be bodyguards, that blocked her way. Jiang Shanglin's voice was chilly. "You asked for this yourself. Although the fragrance court does not allow anyone to stir up trouble within their premises, but if someone intentionally picks a fight, they will not stop their patrons from settling disputes privately." "Is that so?" Qingyu asked with an indiscernible smile. "If you kneel down and beg me now, I can consider being a little more gentle with you." Jiang Shanglin had always been more forgiving towards beauties, not to mention this flawless beauty before him. Although he had quite a feisty personality, he was not beyond indulging in a little bit of fun. "If you beg me, I can also consider being a bit more gentle with you," Qingyu replied with a harmless smile. Jiang Shanglin could no longer maintain that smile on his face as it turned dark, and he said through tightly gritted teeth, "Capture her." Hearing that, the guards immediately lunged forward to catch her, but before they could even get close, the ground right before their feet suddenly had an entire row of glittering blades protruding out threateningly. If they had moved just a step faster, their feet would have been pierced right through. Trepidation immediately rose within their hearts. Seeing that, Jiang Shanglin's eyes quickly scanned the surroundings, seeking to see who was being such a busybody, to actually dare stop him from capturing his target. But that one searching glance caused him to be stunned into a daze. That lithe, slender figure with its tiny gyrating waist came walking slowly over. Every single movement she made seductive and alluring. But the expression on her face was cold, that elicited a little fear in people. How could Jiang Shanglin not know who that person was? He had even tried to pursue her before, but was properly put in place by her brutal and vicious skills, and he did not dare to harbor any thoughts about the woman anymore. "Miss Lu Ji." Jiang Shanglin smiled faintly at the approaching person. "I wonder what does Miss Lu Ji mean by this? The fragrance court forbids anyone from stirring up trouble. Don't you already know this from your first day here?" Lu Ji asked in an icy tone. Chapter 216. 3. Submit to me, and you'll ascend to ninth heavens with desire, even though it was empty at that moment. But the teapot was still rather heavy by itself, so it was not a light hit. The man could not help but wince in pain, and his face turned an uglier shade. Qing Yu arched an eyebrow up and her voice was melodious as she asked, "Are you awake now?" Jiang Shanglin's body shook with barely contained rage. "Do you know who I am? How dare you offend me like this? Why would I care who you are?" Qing Yu curved her eyes into crescents, though the smile did not show inside. "I told you to scram. If you had obediently taken your sorry behind out of here, nothing would have happened. But you just had to continue prattling on before my face, which got on my nerves." "How irritating," came out for a breath of fresh air after being cooped up for so long, and one just had to run into such a character. Qing Yu was suddenly feeling a little vexed, and she stood up, wanting to leave the place. But several armored figures suddenly surged in around her, men who seemed to be bodyguards, that blocked her way. Jiang Shanglin's voice was chilly. "You asked for this yourself. Although the fragrance court does not allow anyone to stir up trouble within their premises, but if someone intentionally picks a fight, they will not stop their patrons from settling disputes privately. Is that so?" Qing Yu asked with an indiscernible smile. "If you kneel down and beg me now, I can consider being a little more gentle with you." Jiang Shanglin had always been more forgiving towards beauties, not to mention this flawless beauty before him. Although he had quite a feisty personality, he was not beyond indulging in a little bit of fun. "If you beg me, I can also consider being a bit more gentle with you," Qing Yu replied with a harmless smile. Jiang Shanglin could no longer maintain that smile on his face as it turned dark, and he said through tightly gritted teeth, "Capture her." Hearing that, the guards immediately lunged forward to catch her, but before they could even get close, the ground right before their feet suddenly had an entire row of glittering blades protruding out threateningly. If they had moved just a step faster, their feet would have been pierced right through. Trepidation immediately rose within their hearts. Seeing that, Jiang Shanglin's eyes quickly scanned the surroundings, seeking to see who was being such a busybody, to actually dare stop him from capturing his target. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, but that one searching glance caused him to be stunned into a daze. That lithe, slender figure with its tiny gyrating waist came walking slowly over. Every single movement she made seductive and alluring. But the expression on her face was cold, that elicited a little fear in people. How could Jiang Shanglin not know who that person was? He had even tried to pursue her before, but was properly put in place by her brutal and vicious skills, and he did not dare to harbor any thoughts about the woman anymore. "Miss Luji," Jiang Shanglin smiled faintly at the approaching person. "I wonder what does Miss Luji mean by this? The fragrance court forbids anyone from stirring up trouble. Don't you already know this from your first day here?" Luji asked in an icy tone. Chapter 216. 4. Submit to me, and you'll ascend to ninth heavens with desire. Jiang Shanglin raised his head and replied, "Jiang here naturally realizes that. But this young lady was rude to me first, and I should have the right to deal with it." After saying that, he paused for a moment before he continued. "Although the fragrance court is backed by some powerful might, neither am I a Jiang who should be easily slighted as well. I do not think that the fragrance court will come interfere while I deal with personal matters, would they?" His tone of voice was tinged with a hint of haughtiness. Jiang Shanglin dared to speak so confidently here, because he had an elder brother working for one of the 4 great families in the White Fens lands, who held a rather significant position. And it was because of that identity that many people did not dare go against his wishes, as that was after all a higher realm of stronger power. Who would dare to carelessly offend him? Upon hearing that, Lu Ji laughed and her enchanting face looked even more alluring because of that. But the words that came out from that petite mouth, however, caused Jiang Shanglin's face to turn green. She said, "Who do you think you are to even dare to compare yourself to the fragrance court? Haven't you looked in the mirror to see yourself lately?" Lu Ji was known to have quite a poisonous tongue, a point that everyone in the fragrance court knew well. But she seldom lashed out at people, and when she did, she was the type that would not stop. Qing Yu, who had been watching by the side, stood with her eyes curved into crescents, unable to help but smile. This woman really has quite a personality, but she has never seen this woman when she used to frequent the place back before. The man called her Lu Ji, and it would seem like her identity is similar to that of Lian Ji and the others. No matter how well Jiang Shanglin was able to act, after having been drenched with a whole pot of tea by Qingyu and being humiliated by Lu Ji, even a mud figurine would still possess a spark of fire in them, let alone this petty and bad-tempered live human. It would really be strange if he continued to endure it and did not erupt. Lu Ji, do not push a person too far. I gave in to you because I did not want to be so calculative with a lone woman. Know that in this matter here, you have no right to interfere, and you're being too much. Jiang Shanglin is someone that's not to be trifled with. Jiang Shanglin said those words in a malevolent tone, and then signaled to his subordinates with a look. What are all of you still standing there in a daze? Hurry up and capture that impudent little wench right now. I'll like to see who dares, Lu Ji said with a chilling holler. If you dare to even lay a single finger on this young lady here today, I will make sure you go out through the fragrance court's doors horizontally. You, Qingyu smiled to herself. Is this woman standing up for her? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although she did not know why, she felt quite touched by the gesture. Jiang Shanglin saw that Lu Ji was not giving him any face, and he was not able to hold himself back anymore. No matter how highly skilled, she's still just one single person. With so many of his men here, would they be unable to take her on? These men are all highly skilled guards his elder brother sent down from the White Finn's lands to protect him. It was probably because his elder brother knew his younger brother's ability in stirring up trouble, and that was why he had sent people down from the White Finn's lands to come protect him. Just as Lu Ji was right about to make her move, she suddenly heard the sound of hurried footsteps from behind, and then heard the familiar voice of a man ring out anxiously. Little ancestor, how did you run all the way here? Chapter 217. 1. Who is better at bootlicking here? Lu Ji followed the source of the voice, and just as she expected, she saw those flamboyant red clothes on the man with a devilishly handsome face come striding towards them, with Lian Ji trailing right behind. Who else could that be besides her lord-in-waiting, Bai Jiyan? And before she could even open her mouth to say anything, she saw Bai Jiyan walk right past her, straight towards the young lady in a white dress who had a faint smile hanging from her lips, and a lazy expression of indifference on her face. He immediately held the young lady by her hand, and started looking her up and down with a measuring gaze. Lu Ji's face was a little astounded. Her lord is acquainted with this young lady? Qingyu pulled hand back with a speechless look on her face. What are you looking for? Have you forgotten that you're a patient now? Why are you running all over the place? In the short period of time that I went to brew the herbs, I came back to find you've already gone missing. I was so afraid that you might have been abducted. Bai Jiyan glared fiercely at her and said indignantly, What a troublesome little lass. The corner of Qingyu's mouth twitched. I'm all recovered. Do you still need to watch me so closely all the time? And that brew you make? Are you purposely playing a trick on me? I am not going to drink that. Bai Jiyan laughed out loud from exasperation. This lass. You must have run away, because you're afraid of taking your medicine. Don't think just because Lu Junyao was not around the past couple of days, nobody can control you. He will be coming back tomorrow, and if he knows that you have not been taking your medicine, he will surely make you drink twice the amount. Qingyu's voice was tinged with a threatening tone. Try to tattle on me if you dare. Will I even need to be a tattletale? He will know once he sees the state of your wounds when he comes back. Bai Jiyan retorted with a smirk. Qingyu had nothing to say to that. She suddenly felt as if her life was not worth living anymore. She wished that she had remained unconscious and didn't wake up from her injuries. Seeing that she was not saying anything, Bai Jiyan stopped his criticism of the young lady. He had not really paid attention to the situation when he saw her just now, but he was finally realizing that something didn't look right. The people around them seemed to be rather aggressive. What's happening? Here to find trouble? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He immediately turned to give Lu Ji beside him a quizzical gaze. Lu Ji opened her mouth to explain. He was probably attracted by this young lady's beauty, and intentionally sought trouble with her so he can forcibly take her away. Bai Jiyan was taken aback a moment, not having heard it clearly, and he went on to ask, "Who did you say he wanted to take away?" Lu Ji gestured with her eyes, indicating that it was the young lady beside Bai Ziyan. Bai Ziyan burst out laughing, and his eyes beautiful as plum blossoms blinked, before he turned his gaze onto Qingyu. "You're in such a good mood today. Already about to be forcibly taken out from here, and you've not done a thing?" Chapter 217. 2. Who is better at bootlicking here? Qingyu then replied with a depreciating smile. "Aren't you the one who said that I must not carelessly get into fights before my injuries are healed? Just having to drink that horrible medicinal brew alone was bad enough. If she still doesn't lie low, he might very well dream up more ways to torment her." As expected, upon hearing those words, Bai Ziyan nodded his head happily. "That's right. Your injuries will heal faster when you do as you're told." Qingyu did not even want to say anything. Bai Ziyan must have stayed at Lu Junyao's side for too long, seeing that their antics were a little similar here. Especially that wide beaming smile on their faces that somehow drove a chill up a person's spine. That looked highly intimidating. At least for Jiang Shanglin. The moment that Bai Ziyan appeared, he had immediately felt his knees go weak for some unknown reason. Bai Ziyan turned to look smilingly at the man. "This patron here would do well to clean your eyes good and proper next time. Do not just go hitting on any pretty girl you see so carelessly. There's always a mountain higher than the one you see, and there are many people you cannot afford to offend. Remember my warning to you here today, and you'll be able to live for a few more years." The last Qingyu was not some soft persimmon that could be easily kneaded and manipulated. Although her temper was rather good most of the time, and also had a kind heart, but if one were to really get her riled up, the ways she knew of tormenting a person were endless. Seeing the man who suddenly appeared being so protective of Qingyu, no matter how aggrieved he felt, Jiang Shanglin did not think it prudent to insist on taking the young lady away. After all, the man seemed deep and unfathomable, even stronger than his elder brother, and he was not about to go stub his toe on such a hard steel plate. He had no choice but to give up and swallow the indignity here today. "Your humble Jiang here has caused undue affront. I shall take my leave." Jiang Shanglin opened his mouth to say haltingly, his face dark as he turned around to walk out of Fragrance Court. He would probably not want to set foot in this place ever again. Seeing that the man is gone, Bai Ziyan then kept that fake and insincere smile away, before he started to preach endlessly to Qingyu once again. Qingyu remained silent. So terrifying. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She had just come to realize just how much of a nag Bai Ziyan really was, and really had great potential in becoming a nanny. Who is she? Seeing her lord-in-waiting acting so familiar with the young lady, Lu Ji could not help but feel bewildered. This was the first time she was seeing this young lady in this place. So when did her lord come to know her? Lian Ji laughed softly. "She can already be considered as a regular patron of our fragrance court. You were not around during that period, and you have naturally not seen her before. She and my lord are." Lian Ji looked at the young lady, who had a look of defeat on her face, and Lian Ji's eyes flashed with a glint. She was the one who cured the poison our overlord was afflicted with. Thinking back on it, it must have been the work of fate. Haven't you realized that she's the same little thief who stole the polar fire core from us a few years back? Chapter 217. 3. Who is better at bootlicking here? Lu Ji had heard a little about the incident a few years back, and she had thought that the thief had really been audacious and bold. But wasn't it said that the little thief was a young youth? Lu Ji asked with an eyebrow raised. Her memory was not that bad. Lian Ji shook her head in helplessness. "We were all deceived. This lass here is really good in disguising herself." Upon hearing that, the interest in Lu Ji's eyes intensified. She liked interesting people like this the most. Lian Ji was one of the few people who knew that largely unknown side of Lu Ji, and seeing the look in the woman's eyes, Lian Ji immediately said in warning, "You better not harbor any thoughts about this young lady. She isn't someone you can trifle with." "Why not?" Lu Ji asked, not understanding. Lian Ji's tone was stern and unyielding. "She belongs to the overlord. The overlord treats her very differently." "If you're going to ask me how differently, Wait till the Lord comes back, and you can see for yourself. Lu Ji stiffened her lips but did not say anything, the expression on her face dark and forbidding. After a round of naggy chiding, Qingyu obediently went back to take her medicine, and Bai Yin gave her a sweet just like always. After she finished the bitter brew, a vein throbbed at Qingyu's temple. That fella knew that you will not like the medicinal brew, and he left instructions for me to give this to you after you finish your medicine. Does he really think you're a small child? Bai Yin looked like he really did not know whether to laugh or cry, but it was also the first time that Lu Junyao cared for another person so conscientiously, afraid that she would find the medicine too bitter, and was so doting on the little lass. Qingyu felt as if she was being laughed at, and she sulked for a good long while, her face expressionless. She then tore the wrapper off the candy and tossed it right into her mouth, before crushing it to pieces between her teeth, like she was actually biting someone in her mind. The thick, robust sweetness, unable to dissipate the aggrievement she felt inside. As if he was able to sense the indignant rage flaring out from the young lady, Bai Yin then said with a laugh, "You only need to take the medicine for a few more days. When all the scab on your back falls off, and your skin grows back, you will not need to drink it anymore. This will also serve to be a good lesson for you as well. See whether you will still risk your own well-being to go save others next time." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu scoffed disgruntledly. "Every time you get hurt, that tyrant Lu Junyao will immediately come torment me. Don't you think it's really difficult to be an elixir cultivator nowadays? I was naive and ignorant back then to be deceived by this black-hearted fella, following him to roam and wander all over the place, living a life of suffering for many years. Turns out that he's such a heartless one, who does not spare a thought for his underlings like me at all. You can see how that fella only treats you well, doting on you like he would his daughter. So for my sake, can you take good care of yourself, so that you would not need me to put in so much effort to treat your injuries all the time? I'm sure you see what a hard life I lead here. Just worrying about Lu Junyao alone is enough of a headache for me, and I know have another lass here on my hands. Don't you think he's such a troublesome lord to serve? And I have nowhere to voice my complaints, but to swallow them back down in my belly." Chapter 217. 4. Who is better at bootlicking here? Every time Bai Yin starts on an endless tirade, Qingyu was guaranteed to voice her protest, her face contorting up in disdain. But it was strange today. He had been rambling on for so long, and the young lady had been looking at him with earnest interest. Not only had she not exhibited the slightest bit of impatience, she was listening intently, except for that seemingly slightly gloating expression on her face. Does she need to be so obvious about it? What kind of an expression is that on your face? Why are you looking at me like that? Bai Yin asked in bewilderment. But very soon he came to know why. A soft male voice came from behind him, magnetically low and enchanting, pleasing to hear. But to Bai Yin's ears, it was absolutely nightmarish. "So, you actually hold so much disgruntlement against me. Why didn't you tell me earlier? If there is anything that I am doing wrongly, I can correct myself. I'll make sure I change till it is to your satisfaction." Bai Yin's face turned ashen, his face incredulous as he stared at Qingyu. He saw the young lady's eyes curve up into crescents, her smile exceptionally radiant, looking exactly like a sly little kitten who had just managed to steal a fish. "No, that's not right. Not a kitten. Kittens are not as sly as that. What is the name that Lu Junyao is always calling her again? Little fox. She's truly a crafty little fox. That was rather wicked of her, to not signal to him at all. Don't even know when Lu Junyao actually came back, and how much did he really hear? She has been spending too much time with that black-hearted fella, and had become similarly black-bellied." Bai Yin turned himself around stiffly, and when faced with the man's face with its mirthless smile, he started to say sheepishly, I was just chatting with the little lass, and did not mean anything that I said. You're really great, the absolute best, and there is nothing about you that needs to change. You must have misunderstood what I really meant. I was merely trying to express just how special you are to the lass." "Oh." Lu Junyao arched up an eyebrow, his eyes filling up with suspicion. Do you really mean that? I only speak from the bottom of my heart. Bai Ziyin quickly nodded and reaffirmed. Look throughout the entire cloud heaven. Who can possibly reach the kind of attainment you have done before they turn 100 years old? And to hold reign over a good part of the realm. Heavens know just how many people worship you so much they can't wait to be led by you. So for me to be able to serve you is an absolute honor to me, and I cannot be more glad. How could I possibly be dissatisfied in any way? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qingyu had been trying to hold back her laughter for too long, and she had finally reached her limits, unable to keep it in, and had burst out laughing. And with that burst of laughter, the stern and tense atmosphere that had built up in the room suddenly dissipated into nothing. And as expected, Qingyu received a death glare from Bai Ziyin. She quickly tried her best to rein in her laughter and opened her mouth to say, I'm sorry, I really did not mean to do that. I've suddenly come to realize that you truly have the gift of the gab. Chapter 218. 1. Highest point of cloud heaven, mind-free peak. And it wasn't just great, but there was absolutely no one who was more glib and better at bootlicking than him. With his level of skill in sailing with the wind, if there was a bootlicking contest, Bai Ziyin would definitely be firmly entrenched as the champion. How could Lu Junyao possibly not be able to detect the hypocrisy in those words? He clicked his tongue and did not bother with Bai Ziyin anymore, walking himself over to sit down opposite Qingyu. His long slender fingers picked up a cup from the table and slowly poured himself a cup of tea, before he brought it slowly to his lips to take a sip. Qingyu's face was taken aback slightly, her gaze fixed upon the cup in the man's hand. If memory served her correctly, she seemed to have just drunk from that cup. It was like he had sensed her gaze as Lu Junyao curved up the corners of his lips and glanced at her. What are you looking at? Nothing. Just forget it. It was probably just by accident. What is the situation out there like now? So many days have passed and Qing Tianlin still has not found me. I don't think that he will continue to search for me. Qingyu said as she looked at the man. Lu Junyao laughed softly. Do not let your guard down. You should know very well how persistent that man is. You'd better wait for a while longer to let the matter die down further, before you make any plans. How about the faint mist sect? Does little Bei know that I am fine? That foolish kid has always been highly concerned for me, and if he does not hear any news of me, he will be very worried. Qingyu's eyes narrowed as she said in a low voice. You do not have to worry. That kid is so smart, and he will surely know that you're fine. Lu Junyao said reassuringly in a gentle voice. Qingyu nodded slightly. Lu Junyao placed his hand over the girl's that was placed on the table, his finger running lightly over the scrape wound she got when they fell down the cliff before. It was a very shallow wound, and it healed very quickly, left with only a faint and indiscernible mark. Qingyu was startled as her hand shrank back by reflex. The man suddenly opened his mouth to ask, in the time that you were in the faint mist sect, did you discover anything? Did you locate any signs of Antlan's soul? When I went into the forbidden grounds, I sensed something familiar. But as time was very tight, I was unable to look into it carefully. I'll have to make another trip to that place. Upon saying that, her attention seemed to have shifted, and she did not notice that her hand was still being lightly caressed by the man. I'll go with you next time. Lu Junyao said gently. Sure. Bai Ziyin, who still had not gone out, felt his mouth twitch when he saw that scene. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. That fella is really just too shameless to take advantage of that young lady so brazenly, and still put on such a decent face. I just can't make myself watch any longer. He had felt that the man had been too cold-blooded and unfeeling before, but seeing him being so caring and attentive now, he really wasn't used to it. But he was really developing towards becoming a more normal person, and Bai Ziyin was hopeful that it would become better and better. Chapter 218. 2. Highest point of Cloud Heaven. Mind-free peak as the highest realm, Cloud Heaven had robust and strong spirit power in the air, highly skilled pugilists as numerous as clouds. People from the lower realms were all doing everything they could to work on their cultivation, seeking only to reach cloud heavens, standard to ascend into the realm, bringing them one step closer towards becoming a powerful pugilist. The cloud heavens' vast lands were divided into 5 parts. Territories of the Dark Lands, the Heavenly Healer Tribe, the Bright Moon Divine Temple, the Barbarian Tribe, and the Hunters Guild, each taking a side, separate and independent. Besides these 5 great powers, there was another place that stood high above them all. That place was called the Mind-Free Peak. It was said that only people whose cultivation had reached a certain realm of power and were truly able to achieve the 6 roots of peace and tranquility, with all their emotional attachments severed, people who holds absolutely no desire or passion, would then be able to enter this mysterious mind-free peak. No one knew where the mind-free peak was exactly, but only knew that it opened itself up only once every 1,000 years, where a strange phenomenon will manifest. A heavenly stairway would descend from the heavens high above, and following the stairs up would lead one to the mind-free peak. But whether that was just a legend or it really existed, was not known, as old freaks who reached 1,000 years of age in cloud heaven could be counted on one hand, people who seldom revealed themselves, recluses who shut themselves from the world. Hence, no one was able to verify the truth of the legend. But recently, a rumor had sprung out of nowhere, claiming that the mind-free peak would open itself this year. Calculating the time, it had already been 1,000 years, and people from all walks of life starting to become impatient and restless. The Dark Lands were filled with a bunch of people who were not afraid to jump into the hustle in the slightest, and upon hearing that the mind-free peak was about to appear, they were all on high alert. However, that fervor was expected to fade as the heat of the rumor dissipated over time. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. The entire bunch of scoundrels must really be dreaming. Even if the mind-free peak really appears, does it have anything to do with them at all? Do they really ridiculously think that they can go test their powers? Sun Luo clicked his tongue as he grumbled, his face disapproving as he walked inside. The moment he stepped into the main hall, he was met with the sight of 2 people sticking themselves so closely to each other that he berated them in shock. The 2 of you had better watch yourselves. It's only the middle of the day now. Those 2 were just too much. It's not enough that they were never apart all the time, but they didn't even care when they were out here in public like this. If he had come in any later, the 2 of them would probably have removed their clothes. Meiji raised an eyebrow seductively, her lips lusciously red. She leaned like there wasn't a single bone in her body within the man's embrace, her voice lazy and sultry as she said, "Ruining someone's happiness. Be careful you don't suffer punishment from heaven. Tui, the 2 of you are being so indecent in public and you're blaming me instead. Wait till the Overlord comes back, and you'll see how he will deal with the 2 of you," Sun Luo said, his face full of contempt. Chapter 218. 3. Highest point of cloud heaven, mind-free peak. Heavens know where the Overlord himself has gone gallivanting to. He doesn't have time to care about what we do. Meiji straightened herself up from little monster's embrace and raised her eyes to look up at the chiseled line of the man's jaw. She could not help but to lean in to kiss it. That sudden action caused little monster's body to stiffen, and his eyes that were already red as blood then deepened in shade. The large hand placed upon the woman's waist could not help but to tighten its grip slightly, seemingly sending her a warning hint. But Meiji looked as if she was oblivious to it as she said with a sultry smile, "No need to be so anxious. We'll continue in a moment once we get out of here." A corner of Sun Luo's temple twitched, and his knuckles crackled loudly as his hands clenched up tightly. "I'll leave if there's nothing important." He was not going to watch this licentious couple flirt with each other. Were they bullying him for being single, and all by his lonesome? "All right. Well, stop pulling your leg. Of course I asked you to come here today to discuss something important." Meiji kept away the naughty smile on her face and said seriously, "You've surely heard the story that's currently spreading like wildfire out there about Mind-Free Peak? What? You believe in such rumors as well?" Sun Luo looked at the woman to ask. "Rumor?" Meiji curled up her lips and asked with a faint smile. "Do you know who was the source of that piece of news?" "Who?" "It came from the Bright Moon Temple's Grand Priest, Song Jian, A prophecy derived from the divination that was carried out half a month ago. How much of that do you think is true? Meiji opened her mouth to ask Sun Luo. Sun Luo's eyes darkened. It's actually a prophecy from Songjian. The Bright Moon Temple's 10 Grand Priests was led by Songjian. Not just in the Bright Moon Temple, but even throughout the entire cloud heaven. One would not be able to find a better augur. His prophecies had never once been wrong, and hence the news was highly believable. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. After the Overlord's absence for so many years, the Dark Lands is no longer like it was before. Besides the reclusive barbarian tribe, all the other powers, with the Hunters Guild being the most aggressive, have been suppressing the Dark Lands. If things continue on like this, the Dark Lands might very well disappear from the face of Cloud Heaven, as one of the prominent powers one fine day. Speaking about that, Meiji's voice paused for a moment before she continued slowly. The Mind-Free Peak might just turn out to be an opportune turning point for us all. Sun Luo only needed to contemplate on her words for an instant to understand what she was trying to say. You mean to ask our Lord to go climb the Mind-Free Peak? That's right. Sun Luo furrowed his brows and shook his head. That will not work. Don't you know the Lord's character well enough by now? He has never cared for hollow fame like this, and would never want to waste his time on it. Moreover, doesn't the Mind-Free Peak require one to attain the 6 roots of peace and tranquility, to be a person free of desire, before one can enter? The Lord's aura is too devilish and tainted, and I fear he might not even be able to take a single step onto the heavenly stairway. Chapter 218. 4. Highest point of Cloud Heaven Mind-Free Peak. How would we know without even giving it a try? Meiji scoffed, her face haughty and proud. Few can even compare with our Lord throughout the entire Cloud Heaven. If he is not able to make it up the Mind-Free Peak, no one else will be qualified to at all. Her words were filled with her admiration and worship of that man. But her voice had just dropped off when she felt someone pinch her waist. That was anything but gentle. She gasped involuntarily, and when she saw that glint of displeasure in the eyes of the man just behind her, she quickly hugged the man reassuringly and said in a coquettish voice, "But of course, you are the greatest one in my heart." The man then retracted the look in his eyes. Sun Luo was speechless when he saw that exchange. They were just having a serious discussion, and the focus has suddenly been diverted again. Sun Luo, our Lord has probably gone running down to the lower realm to look for the little lass again. It's your responsibility to bring the Lord back here, and to tell him about this. Meiji went on to say. Hearing that, Sun Luo raised a finger to point at himself. Me? A snort of derision then escaped from his nostrils as he said, "Why do I have to go down to that lousy and decrepit lower realm? They limit this and limit that down there, and I'm not like our Lord who is able to suppress his cultivation so easily. Remaining there for too long might even cause my powers to deteriorate. I'm not going down there." "You're really not going?" Meiji arched up an eyebrow. She then said in a highly casual voice, "I heard the Overlord recently summoned Yi Ji down to the lower realm. I wonder if it's to protect the little lass. She might really not be coming back here ever again, and it'll be so hard to even see her again." She had barely just finished when Sun Luo's face immediately changed. The man did not say a single word as he turned himself around and left. Meiji fell into Little Monster's arms in a titillating laugh. That guy is really as gullible as always. Just a single mention of Yi Ji, and he'd do just anything. Little Monster glanced at the woman, and his voice was melodious as he asked, "Has Yi Ji really gone down to the lower realm?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Meiji burst out laughing as she ran her slender finger over the man's highly defined cheekbone. "Of course I lied to him. Be careful that he might come back to settle scores with you. This woman here isn't afraid of him. When has he ever triumphed in a fight with me? He will be beaten to a pulp." Meiji said complacently, her mesmerizing face exceptionally alluring. The man's scarlet eyes were unwaveringly fixed upon her, never moving away. His adoring gaze pleased Meiji immensely, and she slipped her arms around his neck as she said temptingly in a seductive voice, "Come, let's get back to our unfinished business." Chapter 219. 1. Finally waited till the day you came back in a blink. Qing Lan Fei had already been keeping tight vigil by the ice bed for 2 whole months. As she was suffering from a deficiency in her soul, her cultivation was not even half of that when she was at her peak, and she had unknowingly come to be touched by the chill emanating from the ice bed. Her body becoming colder and colder, her face turning more and more pale with each passing day. She knew that her body that was still deficient would not be able to last much longer, and she would need to gather up her remaining soul fragments, or this flesh body that had taken so much effort to form would be destroyed into nothing. On this day, she felt as if her entire body was being roasted over a fire. Even though she felt so icy cold, she could feel the fire burning up from inside while the chili that had seeped and wrecked at her body, so agonizing that she clutched her arms around herself, biting her lips so hard they turned white. It's so hot. No, it's really cold. It's really so torturous, like she was going to die. Lan Fei, come back. Come on back. It was not known where the voice came from, filled with a faint and fleeting weariness, and an immense power, crashing upon her. A sharp and intense pain rose in her head, and her slender body turned stiff, straightening up for an instant. She then lost consciousness as she slowly fell. The figure that had fallen onto the ice bed had slowly started to freeze, a layer of frost forming over her fingers. In just a blink, her entire arm had frozen up quickly, and the situation was becoming highly critical. In mere moments, ice had formed over a good half of the woman's body, and it was still continuing to spread. Suddenly, from the ice bed, a bright golden light burst forth, melting all the ice on the woman's body in an instant. Then, the man who had laid on that ice bed for hundreds of years, almost as good as dead, fluttered his eyelashes and slowly opened his eyes. Strange flickering lights surged for dominance within those ink-black eyes for a while before they slowly settled into a calm. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. At that same moment, a strange phenomenon had suddenly appeared somewhere in cloud heaven. Without a single cloud in the sky over great distances, lightning crackled and thunder boomed. Tempestuous winds and torrential rain kicked up. The phenomenon lasted for a long while, bring about endless chaos. That fella has finally come back. It had not felt so real for heavens know how long, where his bodily senses were able to feel. Mo Jingyu opened his eyes, and after feeling dazed for a short moment, his eyes regained their focus. He moved his arm a little, and came to feel something soft. The expression on his face was startled as he turned his gaze to look. The sight of that flawlessly beautiful countenance that was so familiar it seemed to have been etched right into his bones rushed straight into his mind and heart, in that one instant. In that more than 100 years that he was almost like the living dead. The first half of that time, he had been in a deep sleep. The later half of that time was him struggling to recover from the wounds his body had suffered, unable to wake up, but had his consciousness intact. Chapter 219. 2. Finally waited till the day you came back. He had not forgotten that voice he had heard all of a sudden a few months ago, that was so familiar it almost brought tears to his eyes. That was his Fei heir, the one person he loved right into his very soul. It was not a dream. It had all felt so real, where she held his hand as she stayed by his side, talking to him. Although he was unable to speak and his body unable to move, he was energized by the immense delight that brought him closer and closer to regaining consciousness. It could very well be said that a large part of the reason that he was able to wake up so quickly was all because Fei heir's voice had always accompanied him supportively, giving him great strength. How could he not be moved? Even though he had sustained such grave injuries back then, that turned him into a living dead person for such a long time, he had never once regretted the decision he made. From the very first moment that he saw her, he had already told himself that he would forever love her, protect her, together in life and death, never to part. Fei heir. His voice called out softly, carefully so as to not startle the little figure right before him. The magnetic and alluring voice had become a little hoarse and grating from the lack of use over such a long period of time while he was deep in sleep. But that deeply heartfelt call did not elicit the slightest sliver of response from the figure lying at the side of the ice bed. Mo Jingyu could not help but become anxious, his movements hesitant as he reached his hand out to caress the woman's face. But his fingers had just touched the woman's skin when he was shocked by the bone-biting chill on her. How did it become like this? He stretched his hand out to feel the woman's wrist, and he immediately understood. It was because his awakening had caused his heart that was encased in ice to suddenly purge, freezing everything around him, turning all the inanimate objects around him into ice sculptures, not to mention a live person like her. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Upon realizing that, Mo Jingyu did not tarry a moment longer. Although he had just regained consciousness, and parts of his body had not fully recovered, it had no problem carrying up the slender figure in his arms at all. Without needing to exert much strength, he stretched his arms out and carried Qing Lanfei up from the ground into his embrace, letting her lean close onto him. He then lowered his head and kissed the woman's cold frozen lips, sucking out all the chill in her body. At such close proximity, he could clearly see Qing Lanfei's immensely pale and colorless face slowly come to assume a visible tinge of rosiness. And the face that could bring ruin to countries became even more captivating, impossible to take one's eyes off of. Mo Jingyu had been worried about the person in his arm, seeking only to purge the chill trapped in her body. But the prolonged kiss then seemed to stir up other emotions inside his body. Mo Jingyu's gaze deepened for some unknown reason. He had not been so intimate with Fei Er for such a long time. Chapter 219. 3. Finally waited till the day you came back. Once the little devil in his heart had extended its claws, it was hard for him to retract it. The man then soundlessly started its invasion through the undefended gates of the woman's mouth, to seize the sweetness within that belonged to him. Ugh! Qing Lanfei had just regained consciousness, and she was almost suffocated by the man's face that was furiously plastered right up against her own, her breath being taken right out of her body. She experienced a rare moment of mindless dazedness, overwhelmed by the relentless and furious assault on her mouth, before she blinked her bright eyes in disbelief. Jingyu, is it really you? Is this just a dream? Just moments ago, he was still lying there motionless and unmoving. And now, he is suddenly here right in front of her alive and well, and is stealing a kiss while she was unconscious? In response, she was wrapped in a powerful embrace. An embrace so powerful that she was almost squeezed right into his bones, to become one with him so that they would never have to part again. Qing Lanfei slowly raised her hands up to curl them around the man's waist, her small petite face snuggling into his neck. Delighted at regaining what she had once lost, she murmured softly, "I just knew it. I just knew that you would come back. You will never ever want to leave me behind. You dolt. How could I possibly bear to abandon you?" Mo Jingyu whispered with a sigh, kissing the top of her head lovingly. "Let me take a good look at you." Qing Lanfei slipped out from the man's embrace, still holding the man's hands. Even though so many years had passed, the still flawless and deadly mesmerizing face gazed at her with his sparkling eyes, unwilling to move in the slightest from her face. The tender and loving eyes gazing back at him almost melted his heart. Mo Jingyu's voice was a little hoarse as it sounded in her ears. "Fei Er, don't stare at me like that. I just want to look at you like this forever." Qing Lanfei replied, not hiding how much she missed him at all. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mo Jingyu then said, "You know that I am completely unable to resist you at all. What are you trying to resist against?" Qing Lanfei arched up an eyebrow, her arms hanging loosely around her neck, the entire weight of her body leaning weakly onto the man. But that action from the woman that was carried out without any intention was immediately irresistibly alluring to the completely defenseless man. Mo Jingyu laughed softly and his hoarse voice sounded, "I have just woken up, and as I have not moved for such a long time, I am not that nimble and agile yet. But if you really want it, I can still satisfy what you desire. However, I am worried that I might have grown a little rusty having laid here for so long. I might accidentally hurt you." What is he talking about? Accidentally hurt her? Chapter 219. 4. Finally waited till the day you came back. Qing Lanfei was stunned, and it was a while before she realized what his words really meant. Her face immediately flushed beet red. So red that it almost looked like blood was going to drip from her face. She bit down on her lip bashfully and gushed. "You scoundrel! Who said I was thinking of such a thing?" She was probably too embarrassed when the woman who had been leaning closely against the man suddenly pushed him away in utter disgust, seeking to be far away from him. Mo Jingyu laughed aloud at the woman, coming over to wrap her in an embrace despite her struggles, and said in a soothing voice, all right. You were not thinking of that, and it was just me, all right? Who asked my little fey heir to be beautiful as a heavenly fairy, that upon the sight of you, makes me unable to help myself, but to want to. You're still going on about that? Afraid that that incorrigible face of his was going to continue to spout out shocking and offensive nonsense, Qing Lanfei quickly covered his mouth with her hand, preventing him from finishing his sentence. The man's mouth was really daring with his words, and it was because of his gift of the gab that everyone in the entire cloud heaven, from freakish old hags, who lived almost 1,000 years, to little babies who had yet to grow a full set of teeth, they were all quickly taken in by his sweet honeyed tongue. Mo Jingyu looked at her beet-red face, who was seemingly almost dying of embarrassment, and he decided to not tease her anymore. He held the woman's petite wrist up and planted a light kiss on her smooth-skinned palm, sending tingles through the woman. He brought her hand up and placed it over his rapidly thumping heart, and Mo Jingyu looked into her eyes with a tender gaze. Fei heir, thank you for coming here by my side once again. Qing Lanfei's eyes sparkled. You fool, thanks are not necessary. If not for you, I might need to sleep for another few hundred years, or I might even never wake up again. Mo Jingyu said with a slightly self-mocking smile on his lips. I had never thought that I would sleep for a whole 100 years. And in that 100 years, so many things have happened. After a long quiet silence, Mo Jingyu suddenly held her tightly. I am really immensely grateful to you. In these 100 years, the only thing that enabled me to hold on and not give up, fighting to wake up once more, were thoughts of you. And our children. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Upon hearing that, Qing Lanfei's body stiffened, and her face paled slightly. What did you say? Their children. Their children were long departed from this world. In order to save Jingyu back then, not only had she had to pay a price, their pair of unborn children had also been sacrificed, their lives taken away from them at the hands of their own heartless mother. Qing Lanfei's eyes grew moist. Their children were already dead. Chapter 220. 1. Who is the rat that's scheming against me behind my back, killed with her own hands? Unknowingly, the tears flowed down her cheeks into the man's neck. Mo Jingyu was startled, and he quickly released his hold on the woman. He lifted the tiny red-eyed face and asked worriedly, Why are you crying? Hearing the question, Qing Lanfei was saddened even more, gasping in between sobs as she said, So sorry, Jing. Our children are already. She just could not continue with her sentence, as she herself felt that it was such a cold-blooded and heartless deed. When one could be so stone-hearted to harm their own flesh and blood, she really wasn't fit to be a mother. Mo Jingyu was intelligent enough to decipher from those few stuttered words, and her agonized expression, why the woman was so sad. He could not help but feel rather amused as he lifted a finger to wipe away the tears rolling down her cheeks. Already a mother, and you're still such a crybaby. Shouldn't you feel abashed by it, Where did this poor little kitten come from? Mo Jingyu teased gently, as he kissed the woman on her forehead over her red tearful eyes. Hush now and stop crying already. I just regained consciousness and my heart is still a little weak, so don't hurt my heart so much like this, or it might kill me, you know. The man always knew how to coax her with his honeyed words, and Qing Lanfei let out a soft laugh despite herself. She reached out a hand to pinch the man, and after that laugh, her tears actually stopped, but the sadness between her brows just would not fade away. Mo Jingyu pinched her cheeks and arched up an eyebrow. Silly girl. You really thought that our children are dead, and that is why you broke into tears? Qing Lanfei was stunned for a moment. What are you trying to say? Mo Jingyu curved his lips up and smiled. How could the children of Mo Jingyu's possibly die so easily? Qing Lan Fei's eyes slowly widened as she stared incredulously at the man. Mo Jingyu swiped his palm gently before her face, and a watery mirror appeared right before her. As the image of a young lady slowly took shape within. The young lady had an exquisitely good-looking countenance, and except for the mesmerizingly alluring pair of slightly upslanted phoenix-like eyes, the rest of her face looked very much like Qing Lan Fei. The image in the mirror shimmered, and it came to show the figure of a lean-bodied youth, his countenance refreshingly handsome. He looked a little cold when he did not smile, and had the same pair of beautiful phoenix-like eyes, but compared to the young lady, there was a lesser tinge of devilishness in him, looking a whole lot more wholesome. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qing Lan Fei's mouth fell agape, too astounded for words. Look at them here. Whose seed do you think these two little imps are? Don't they look so much like the two of us? Mo Jingyu said with a laugh. How? Qing Lan Fei shook her head in disbelief. They had clearly died. Mo Jingyu asked with a laugh. Aren't you underestimating the strength of our bloodlines? To have inherited our blood, how could they possibly be anyone ordinary? Just what kind of great powers their bodies could possibly hold is something even the two of us will not be able to understand. Chapter 222. Who is the rat that's scheming against me behind my back? Their life force was already strong and resilient enough, and having undergone such tumultuous danger, while still in their mother's body, they were destined to lead extraordinary lives. Feng Lan Fei unconsciously gripped the man's hands tightly, her voice a careful whisper as she asked, Where are they now? You want to see them? Mo Jingyu let out an indecipherable laugh. The time is not yet ripe. Wait a little longer. They will come to Cloud Heaven soon, and it wouldn't be too late for you to meet them at that time. Why? Qing Lan Fei queried with her brows knitted up, not understanding the reason why. Having gotten the news that her children were still alive, Qing Lan Fei immediately could not contain her joy, hoping to be able to see them right at that moment. Why was Jingyu stopping her instead? Mo Jingyu looked at the tiny face creased up in displeasure, and he said rather astutely, Do you need to ask me why? Don't think that I'm unable to see that your soul is currently deficient and incomplete. Do you really want to go meet your children like this, and make them worry for you? The cease between Qing Lan Fei's brows immediately deepened. That's right. She's forgotten about that. At that moment, she could not be considered as a completely real human. Her high spirits suddenly plummeted into gloomy sadness. Mo Jingyu sighed a soft sigh, and gently lifted that sorrowful face up to look at him. Fei Air, you were never so pessimistic in the past, almost brimming over with confidence. Is it because I haven't stayed by your side all these years, and that is why you do not harbor hope in everything that happens? But I'm back now, so what are you still afraid of? His words immediately caused Qing Lan Fei's eyes to grow red-rimmed. He's right. When did she start to become someone so unlike herself? Her edge dulled, and become so weak and vulnerable. Mo Jingyu held her in his arms, and his voice was highly reassuring. Rest assured that I will find all your soul fragments back, and that will be the day that our family will be reunited. And not a single one of all those people who harmed us back then will not be spared. Out of her sight, the man's clear bright black eyes rippled with a glint of bloodthirsty viciousness. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. White Fen's lands. Feng family, even after having remained in Carefree Valley for several days, they still did not manage to find any trace of Qingyu. Qing Tianlin was unable to remain in the lower realm for too long, and he made his way back to the White Fen's lands, after instructing Shi Zhanshen to continue to keep a lookout. Among the White Fen's land's 4 great families, he had gotten 2 great families subdued, including every single person in the Feng family, who did his bidding after he conducted a great purge and injected new blood into it. The most difficult and thorny one to deal with was the Bellied family, who refused to budge by force or persuasion, and the current young lord was not something easily cowed. The Bellied family was the most powerful family clan in the White Fen's lands back then, mighty and highly influential, closely knit. Even though internal conflict occasionally arose among themselves, they were completely united against all external enemies, so it was never easy to take them down. Chapter 220. 3. Who is the rat that's scheming against me behind my back? The other one would be the Nangong family. This family clan had always been a bunch of fence-sitters, always leaning towards the stronger party. Seeing that Qing Tianlin was still unable to deal with the Bellied family, they had now retracted themselves back into their shells, expressing goodwill to him, but never taking a firm stance, remaining on the sidelines to watch him fight the Bellied family. He had always been a person who let people did his bidding prosper, and dealt death to all who went against him. Wait till he has subdued the Bellied family, and the Nangong family will be made an example of for everyone to see. He had always detested such indecisive people with no will of their own the most. It was thought he had probably committed too many wicked deeds recently, and the heavens were feeling rather irked. So they were now giving him a little bit of trouble to add to his problems. Second young master. Big trouble. A highly frantic voice suddenly sounded outside the door, and a flustered-looking figure came rushing in. In his rush, the man failed to notice the step under his feet, and very nearly tripped over it. Qing Tianlin swung to glare piercingly at the man, and the servant immediately felt a chill run up his spine. His voice stuck in his throat. Oh no, oh no. How could he have forgotten what a terrifying man the second young master is? And he had come bursting in here wailing so loudly. Death is probably imminent this time. What happened? Qing Tianlin's voice was indifferent, and it was hard to read his mood. But his eyes clearly told the servant that he better had something important enough for him to be disturbed, or the servant shall bear the consequences. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The servant gulped in aggrievement before he said in a trembling voice. Second young master. I don't know how this rumor started, but it claims that the second young master harnessed and is rearing evil and demonic zombies in the Feng family, wantonly using the blood of the living to nourish them, having taken countless lives. The rumor has somehow reached the ears of people in the Evil Purgers Coalition, and they are now seated in the Feng family's main hall, saying they want the second young master to answer for it. The Evil Purgers Coalition was an independent existence in the White Fens lands, and was not under the jurisdiction of any family clans. The reason for their existence was to orthodoxy, and were against all things heretical and any unorthodox practices. Back when the White Fens lands was just established, the Evil Purger Coalition had already been formed, which was why they held great authority. Rearing evil creatures was considered to be an extremely vile and unforgivable deed, as once such things grew in strength, they could possibly endanger the entire lands, becoming an inextricable scourge that would bring utter devastation. For as long as the White Fens lands had existed, such a bold and audacious deed was completely unheard of, but it was said that someone had done just that now, clearly thinking nothing of the Evil Purgers Coalition at all. How could that possibly be tolerated? So they had come right up to confront the culprit. Others might not know it, but how could Qing Tianlin possibly not know? Chapter 220. 4. Who is the rat that's scheming against me behind my back? He was indeed rearing many evil creatures, and there were even quite a number of living puppets as well. This fact was known only by the heavens, the earth and himself, and no one else. So who could have possibly leaked the news? But there wasn't time for him to think any further, as the servant waiting at the side bolstered his courage, and piped up to remind him. Second young master. Do you want to go hold back those men from the Evil Purgers Coalition first? They said they'll only wait for a cup of tea's time, and if you do not go out to meet them, they'll forcefully search the Feng Manor. They said if they find anything they should not find, then you can't blame them. Qing Tianlin's face was dark. What a shameless and despicable bunch. But he cannot afford to move against the people from the Evil Purgers Coalition right now. If they were allowed to conduct a search now, they might really come to find something to let them seek trouble with him. Damn it. Better not let him find out who is the scoundrel that is scheming against him behind his back. Qing Tianlin already had his hands full looking out for himself here on this side, so it was only natural he could not spare much effort looking for Qingyu, which meant she was safe for the moment. Qingyu's life in the past few days had really been one of complete idleness, without needing to lift a finger to dress or feed herself. Maybe that could be slightly exaggerated, but it wasn't too far from the truth. Her every single need was conscientiously well taken care of, especially when it came to her meals. She had even felt as if she had become rounder around the waist. 10 consecutive days of all that endless bitter herbal medicinal brews had not been in vain. The wounds on her back had all healed up. With Lu Junyao abusing his authority to pressure the man, Bai Ziyan had been forced to dip into his private stash that had been kept secret for many years, allowing the skin on Qingyu's body to glow anew, showing no signs that she had been so severely injured before. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You're leaving again? Bright and early in the morning, the man had come to lean himself against the wall outside her room, bidding farewell in a lazy and languid voice. It was not known whether it was because she had gotten used to having him hang around her these days, that upon hearing that he was leaving, a strange feeling rose up inside Qingyu. It felt a little uncomfortable. Lu Junyao saw the young lady unconsciously knit up her brows, and his lips curled up in a smile. He stretched his hand out to stroke the young lady's head, and said in a low magnetic voice, "If you can't bear for me to leave, why not? Leave together with me?" Chapter 221. 1. I love you, so I want to eat you up. Qingyu scoffed indignantly, but her voice was tinged with a sliver of coyness that she herself was unaware of. Fat hope. Her coy little look made Lu Junyao laugh, and he looked mischievously at her. If that is really the case, upon hearing that I am leaving. His long slender fingers held the young lady's exquisite little chin, his handsome face leaning in close to hers as his captivating voice sounded. Upon hearing that I'm leaving. Why did your face immediately look so unhappy? When did I show an unhappy face? With her chin held in his hand, Qingyu had nowhere to hide, her gaze unwavering as she stared straight at the man. Gazing into the mesmerizing pair of violet eyes that shone and sparkled like purple precious stones, filled with mirth and a faint indulgent glint, Qingyu was caught off guard and inextricably drawn right into them. Her heart felt like it skipped a beat, enraptured by his tender gaze. Qingyu subconsciously lowered her eyes. Again, that same strange feeling. It was not known when it started, that things between the two of them turned to become different. And the way he gazes at her, it seems to make her feel as if he treasures her very much. With her gaze lowered and her long lashes playfully curled up, her flawlessly beautiful face bashfully and demurely turned away, she looked so innocent and untainted, unlike her usual mischievous self, a devilishly alluring glint always in the corner of her eyes. He could still remember back when they had first met each other, when the lass was very much younger, disguised to look like a thin and frail little youth. Who would have thought that she had been hiding her powers, daring to come to the White Fen's lands alone, and succeeded in stealing the polar core fire from him, before vanishing into thin air after that. He had searched the White Fen's lands for 2 whole years without any success, for who could have possibly imagined that the nimble-fingered little youth would turn out to be a young little lass instead? But it was not entirely his fault, as she had only been about 10 years of age back then, and her body had not really started to develop at that time, her facial features still yet to mature. So who could possibly tell? Anyone would have thought that the thief was just a handsome-looking young boy. The way she looked now was every inch an alluring demoness. No like that pretty-looking youth back then at all. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lu Junyao continued to gaze at her, and suddenly started laughing. Had it all been destined by heaven, that she had appeared before him so suddenly to then disappear, before delivering her right to his side once again now? What's so fun? MFFFT. Qingyu's eyes flared wide open, as her unspoken words were drowned by the sudden kiss on her lips. After the initial shock passed, her arms that were hanging by her sides suddenly gripped her clothes, and she felt her heart suddenly beating very fast in that instant, the same strange feeling overwhelming her, rendering her helpless. She just remained in her spot staring into that countenance that was the envy of both gods and mortals, her eyes half closed, as he kissed her with an earnest look on his face. Chapter 221. 2. I love you, so I want to eat you up. It was different from the dominating manner that could not be refused in the past. It was as if he was trying to express a certain emotion, being exceptionally gentle and tender, carefully protective and doting, which was so moving and touching. But just like before, throughout the times it happened, she did not seem to show any resistance to his attempts at intimacy, although she was highly embarrassed by it every time. But she did not feel the slightest bit of dislike. She then recalled what had happened in her previous life, when she was trapped under Qian Tianlin's control, and was unable to resist in any way. He had merely just kissed her lightly on her cheek, but what she had felt back then was not just anger from his deceit and betrayal. She had also felt indescribably disgusted. But with this man before her now, Qing Yu blinked her eyes, and thought seriously about what was happening for a moment. She could possibly have come to like him a little, as despite the many times he had teased her with an evil smile on his face, or when they had touched so intimately like just now, she had not disliked it, but even liked it a little. But the man did not seem to have ever said he liked her before. Though it seemed as though he might have said it before, he always looked like he was just joking around. He had always liked to make jokes, and it was so hard to guess which of his words were speaking the truth, and which were not. As she came to think of that, a strange feeling of frustration suddenly rose up out of nowhere. She had grown to like him, but what if he saw her only as a normal friend? If she were to say something now, wouldn't it become very awkward for them when they come to meet each other in the future? Her manner of thinking was really cute though. Has she ever considered what kind of a normal friend would always be hanging around before someone they did not like? Not to mention the many times he had come to go out of his way to save her. He had repeatedly acted so intimately with her. Intimate actions that would only be seen between lovers. In just that short moment, so many thoughts had gone through her mind. Caught in that turmoil of emotions, her pearly white teeth unconsciously bit down onto the man's lips. She had not bitten down very hard, but it seemed to ignite something in the man's brain. It was as if water had been poured into boiling hot oil, exploding suddenly, impossible to rein in. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qing Yu was not even able to react when she was suddenly cradled up by the waist and lifted up off the ground by just one arm, before being tossed onto the soft bed. The very next instant, the man's tall, well-built body immediately pressed her down, his fingers tangled up with hers, and his thin lips lingering lightly over her cheek, before they closed over the young lady's already reddened and sore luscious-looking lips. The young lady's long soft black hair lay draped over the scarlet-red blankets, an unimaginably beautiful sight. The man's pale violet eyes had turned an intense purple from his raging emotions, as they stared intently at the woman lying beneath him. The exquisitely beautiful face was tinged with a reddish flush from his kisses, and was looking even more seductive, and stirring with her phoenix-like eyes slightly narrowed, becoming indescribably alluring. Chapter 221. 3. I love you, so I want to eat you up. She was never just a weak woman. In fact, braver and stronger compared to many men out there. Every bone in her body resolute and unwavering. She might seem cold and unfeeling on the surface, like she did not care about anything, but was actually a sentimental person inside. One would probably feel that warmth in her caring heart, once they were recognized to be within her personal circle by her. It was not known what it was about her that attracted him, that bound him to her so much, where even when he was back in cloud heaven, he was still unable to stop worrying about her. He just could not help feeling that when she was not by his side, she would come to be bullied and get hurt, or to be incapable of caring for herself properly. It was only when she was by his side where he could physically see her, would his heart be at ease. The young lady was seldom so submissive, forcefully being held down right under his body like this, and she was still not resisting in the slightest. She was clearly and blatantly seducing him right at this moment. The warm kisses had already moved from the young lady's sweet lips down onto her soft, slender neck, her skin smooth and supple, where the slightest pressure he exerted would leave a faint red mark upon that fair, delicate smoothness. Lu Junyao's gaze darkened into a deeper shade, panting faintly as he lifted his head up from the young lady's neck. His voice was tinted with a slight hoarseness as he whispered, "Why aren't you resisting? Aren't you afraid that I will really eat you up?" The clothes of the young lady on the bed was in disarray. Her eyes slightly misted over, so pitifully adorable looking. Hearing the man's words, she did not respond directly, but just remained in that alluring position, her voice soft as she said, "From the spot that you just kissed, I came to sense something." That completely unexpected reply stunned Lu Junyao into a daze for a moment before he started to ask, "Sense what?" "That you like me, right?" Asking that again. It seemed like the same thing happened last time. After he kissed her, she had half-jokingly asked him whether he had fallen in love with her. She's rather persistent, isn't she? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lu Junyao curved up his lips in amusement. "Alright, tell me. So what if I do and so what if I don't?" Qingyu responded with a harmless and disarming smile. "If you do not, your actions here is taking liberties with a young woman, and just toying with me. So in return for that, I will make sure you will be bedridden for the rest of your life, and to closely experience how a reverend lives." Lu Junyao did not know how to respond to that for a moment, and the expression on his face was a little befuddled. Reverend. A reverend refers to a monk. You know, the type that chants scriptures every single day. Man of the frock with no worldly desires, living a life of abstinence away from women. Qingyu's eyes curved up into crescents, explaining very patiently to the man. Lu Junyao suddenly burst out laughing softly. How could he possibly not understand what the little fox's words meant? Chapter 221. 4. I love you, so I want to eat you up with all that talk of a reverend and her character, who never liked to be disadvantaged. If he were to really say he did not like her, she would surely do something vicious to his body that would completely destroy a man. TSK, how did he fall for such a vicious and merciless little one? After he stopped laughing, he then feigned ignorance as he asked with an eyebrow raised, "Then what if I do like you?" The moment his voice fell, the young lady's smiling eyes glinted with a brilliant sparkle as she stretched her hand out curl around his neck, pulling his face close while her tiny mouth opened slightly to say alluringly, "Then I will tell you I like you too." In an instant, the air grew heavy, and it was so quiet except for the faint sounds of the two of them breathing. Lu Junyao's irises contracted immensely, a reaction caused by the overwhelming surge of emotions inside. Had he just imagined what he just heard? What did the lass just say? That she likes him too? Seeing no reaction forthcoming from the man after a while, Qingyu could not help but crease up her brows, her voice slightly chill. "Could you really just be toying with me? If that is really the case." Seeing the aura around the young lady turning sinister and terrifying, Lu Junyao quickly snapped back to his senses, before he said in a soft voice, "Say that one more time." "What?" Qingyu snapped with a displeased look. "What you just said. Say it again." Lu Junyao repeated, his violet eyes unblinking as he looked at her, that were now filled with slight anticipation. Qingyu scoffed. "Which words? That you like me? When did I say that? I don't remember." The man's face suddenly looked a little sad. For the young lady who had expressed her feelings to another person for the first time, but had instead not gotten any response from the other party, her temper immediately rose. She just refused to say it again, and was highly obstinate. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The man did not speak for a while, and Qingyu could not help but feel a little aggrieved. Why did she mindlessly say such words without thinking? In the end, her feelings were just one-sided, and it was so humiliating. She became more frustrated the more she thought about it, and Qingyu went on to push the man still lying on top of her away, seeking to go outside for some fresh air to clear her head. However, her hands had just barely touched the man's body when they were grabbed and brought to his mouth, where the man bit her soft fingers rather ungently. The man then admonished in a mirthful voice, "Why have I fallen for a little one like you here? You are usually quite intelligent and smart all this time, but so clueless at the most critical moments." Qingyu looked like a startled little bunny at that moment, her eyes wide and seeking to pull her hands away. "Speak if you must. Must you bite people?" Chapter 222. 1. Confess true feelings. Emotions stirred the young lady's seductive long phoenix, like eyes glared with an angry expression on her face, that however showed an indiscernible hint of aggrievement and frustration. The lips that had just been assaulted was still a little red and swollen, her eyes a little misty and wet, looking every inch an easy pushover. Her smooth fair hands were held tightly in the man's grip, and her dainty soft body held down on the bed. The collar of her clothes was in a state of disarray, opened slightly, which revealed her beautifully defined collarbone. Looking down a little further, was an alluring and highly seductive rising curve of her skin. She's really such a creature of mesmerizing allure. Lu Junyao's eyes turned terrifyingly dark and ominous, like a ferocious beast would suddenly jump out from within those deep violet eyes, to swallow up the young lady in a single gulp. The fervor in those eyes were so intense it made Qingyu want to run away. But her hands were unfortunately tightly held, and her body completely trapped under the man's body. Although he did not put his full weight down on the young lady, it was enough to make it impossible for her to move in the slightest. Unable to fight him, but forced to remain lying there on the bed. Qingyu knitted her brows, and she struggled a couple more times with her hands. She was unable to break free, so she went on to say calmly in a cold voice, "Let go of me. You're angry." Lu Junyao curved up his lips and smiled. He then pressed his forehead gently against hers as he looked at her with tenderness in his eyes. "Look at me. I'm not looking." Upon saying that, Qingyu clamped her eyelids shut, like she would rather see no evil. Lu Junyao felt rather helpless. He had not thought that the little one could have such a temper before. "Open your eyes and I will tell you who is the person I like." The young lady's eyelashes fluttered slightly, and her aura felt like it was a little depressed. She slowly opened her eyes and her mesmerizing eyes seemed to have lost the spirited vigor from earlier, her expression a little dull. "Such a quick temper. Can't you just hear me out first?" Lu Junyao sighed with a faint smile as he looked at the young lady's exquisite little face. He then said in a slightly hoarse voice, "Look into my eyes. The person I like are in there." Qingyu was stunned into a daze for a moment. Her gaze actually unconsciously turned to look into the man's violet eyes that shone like purple gems. In them, she saw her own slightly startled face. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. What does he really mean? You still do not understand? Lu Junyao suddenly lowered his head and bit the young lady's soft lips. Meeting her startled wide eyes, he laughed softly. "This little fox here always calls me shameless, but I do this only to you and no one else." Qingyu's fingers tightened slightly, unconsciously clenching them up into fists. She lowered her eyes demurely, and came to bite on her lower lip. Her voice was barely audible as she asked, "Does you mean you like me? What else could it be?" Lu Junyao squeezed the young lady's soft fingers, and suddenly cradled her by the waist, spinning their positions around. Chapter 222. 2. Confessed true feelings. Emotions stirred the positions of the two people, had changed in an instant. He was lying on his back on the bed with her on top. She fell when the hands holding her waist suddenly released their grip, her body landing right upon the man's strong and muscular chest. Right splat onto the bare uncovered chest. The man's strong hard chest pressed against the young lady's softness. It brought about a sudden rapture that seeped right into his bones. Qingyu's face immediately flushed a deep red, her hands scrambling to push herself up quickly. But the man unexpectedly stretched his hand out to press her down, and she just laid there on his shoulder. The man's powerful arms embraced her, not allowing her to struggle. That intimate position made Qingyu suddenly feel rather embarrassed, and she squirmed a little squeamishly. Do you really have to do this? It's a little uncomfortable." Of course it would be uncomfortable. The body of a man is built differently from a woman's, hard and stiff muscles all over, completely different from the softness of a woman. But fortunately, this man below her was not like those brawny figures with bulging muscles all over, or it would have felt even more uncomfortable. But because she squirmed, the man's body seemed to stiffen in that instant, and the sound of breathing by her ear grew louder. The hand placed around the young lady's waist suddenly slid lower down, before grabbing her hard. When he heard the startled and embarrassed cry from the lady, he said in a hoarse whisper, "Don't move around so much." Yu bit down on her lip, feeling rather indignant. What is going on here? After confessing their feelings, why does it feel like the man is not even trying to hide his thuggish nature anymore? But since they really liked each other, then this isn't really too much. Hence, they laid there quietly locked in each other's embrace. And it was quite a long while later that the man finally gave a deep sigh and said highly regretfully, I really want to take you along with me so much. Unfortunately, the time was not yet ripe. Making her go face, everything up there would not benefit her in any way. Yu raised her head up slightly to look at him and said, It must be something very important to make you have to leave right now. Lu Junyao replied. It's a little important. Then shouldn't you let go of me already? Yu said with a roll of her eyes. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Is this fella able to differentiate between his priorities at all? When there's something important on hand to deal with, he still can find time to be intimate with her here. Against anything she could have expected, the man merely curved his lips up in a smile to said gently, You're more important. Yu's face turned red involuntarily. That's more than enough. Already bullied her for so long, and he is still continuing to tease her here. But she has come to discover that the fella can really be quite enchanting when he was speaking seriously. Chapter 222. 3. Confess true feelings emotions stirred. And what manner of a matter is it? Yu asked casually. Any impression she had of Cloud Heaven was only limited to the occasional mention of the place by Bai Yen and the others previously. A few scant words which did not reveal much. Hence, she knew very little, and had never been curious about it as well. But ever since she knew that the mother of her host's body was linked to Cloud Heaven, she had developed a high interest towards this higher realm, filled with all kinds of highly skilled pugilists throughout. She was merely asking casually, and did not really expect Lu Junyao to actually tell her anything much. Against anything she expected, not only did he not hold back anything, he told her everything in great detail. There is a highly powerful divine realm in Cloud Heaven that's called the Mind-Free Peak. Legend has it that it opens up only once every millennium, but no one knows how much of it is true. But just recently, it was prophesied that the Mind-Free Peak would open itself soon, and several great powers in Cloud Heaven are seeking to make their way there. Since ancient times, only pugilists who have ascended to the top of the Mind-Free Peak would be recognized as the undisputed number one by the various powers in Cloud Heaven, and that is why. All of them have been strongly urging me to go back for the past few days. When he said that, Lu Junyao sighed out in helplessness. I have no other choice. Because of me, they were forced to swallow their aggrievement and hold themselves up for so many years. This is what I owe them, and I need to answer to them. You're going to that Mind-Free Peak? Yu blinked her eyes, hesitating a moment before she asked. Will it be dangerous? Lu Junyao shook his head gently. I do not know. But since it is a realm of divinity, then it could not possibly be easy to ascend up to. So the place would naturally pose some danger in one way or another. Upon hearing him say that there was danger involved, Yu could not help but furrowed her brows. She remembered the man's unique body constitution, where he would become incredibly weakened once he was hurt. If he was not given treatment in time, he would slowly lose all his ability to resist, which was highly dangerous for him. Will you bring Bai Yen with you? It would not be so bad if Bai Yen was with him. At least he would be able to treat the man's wounds on the spot. But the man shook his head. Among the various powers in Cloud Heaven, each would only be able to send one person in. There is a limit to the number of people that can enter the Mind-Free Peak. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. What a strange rule to have. Yu could not help but be surprised. That rule has been there since far ancient times. Thinking about that, Yu got up slowly from the man's chest, and her dainty fingers lightly brushed over the man's body. A strange and amazing sensation ran through his entire body, and then slowly faded away. Lu Junyao arched up an eyebrow. This is something that can save your life. It will not do you any harm. Chapter 222. 4. Confess true feelings. Emotions stirred. Lu Junyao held her hand in his, the expression on his face an indiscernible smile. Why do I always seem to feel that there are so many secrets hidden in you? Qingyu burst out in laughter. You already know most of my secrets, including being a resurrected soul, and that she was living a second life were things he already knew about. The key thing was that he was too smart, and she would not be able to hide it from him for long anyway. And since he brought up the topic about her having so many secrets, Qingyu could not help raising an eyebrow and glancing at him. You already know so much about me, but I seem to know nothing about you at all. She only knew that he possessed unfathomable high levels of cultivation, and was someone of extraordinary identity in cloud heaven with many pugilists of remarkable skill appearing around him. All of that highly mysterious. He had not said anything about himself, and she had never asked him about it before. But if she had asked, he would have told her. Sure enough, after she said that, the man then said slowly in explanation. There are a total of 5 great powers in cloud heaven: the Dark Lands, the Divine Healers Sect, the Hunters Guild, the Bright Moon Divine Temple, and the Barbarian Tribe. Bai Yen is the young lord of the Divine Healers Sect, and I. He paused for a moment as he turned to look at her and continued. I am the overlord of the Dark Lands. The expression on Qingyu's face turned a little surprised. Although she knew that he definitely held a rather extraordinary identity, she had never thought that he would be the overlord holding reign over one of cloud heaven's greatest powers. Moreover, the name Dark Lands did not sound like it was filled with any upright or moral kind of people, and she was guessing that they were all just like this fella here, a bunch of unorthodox devils. But the fact that Bai Yen was the Divine Healer Sect's young lord was something she knew all along. Bai Yen had sought to probe where she had acquired her skills from several times before, trying to find out more about her, and he had announced his family background to her on his own accord back then. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. But for such a high-ranking member of the Divine Healers Sect to be seen hanging around Lu Junyao, who did not look like any upstanding person, but more like the devils incarnate, the people from the Divine Healers Sect are not interfering at all. Qingyu contemplated on her thoughts. She had previously thought that the two men were, that kind of relationship. And she had even distanced herself from the two of them for a period. After all, she had never seen those two grown men separated far away from each other for any extended periods. But she just realized that the reason they were always seen together was for no other reason than the danger Lu Junyao would be in if he came to be wounded, due to his body's unique constitution. When that thought came to mind, Qingyu then pulled out several more life-saving elixirs and medicine from her personal dimensional space, before pushing them all into the man's hands. Keep all these well. They will be useful at critical moments. As Bai Yen will not be with you, you have to extra careful to not let yourself get hurt. Chapter 223. 1. Dare to seduce people. I'll make you cry. Lu Junyao could do nothing but laugh, as he kept the things the young lady pushed into his hands carefully away. The trip to Cloud Heaven this time might take me away for a very long time, and I will not be able to come back within this period. Lu Junyao knitted his brows. You must take good care of yourself, and not get injured again. Qing Tianlin probably has too much on his plate now, and he would not have the energy to find trouble with you for quite a while. Upon hearing that, Qingyu arched up an eyebrow and asked, What did you do? I merely gave him something to occupy himself with, so that he would not have the time to hatch any scheme against you. Lu Junyao narrowed his eyes and said in a haughty, scoffing voice. Qingyu bit her lip and smiled at him. Then does that mean I can go back to the Faint Mist Sect now? The Faint Mist Sect is comparatively safe for now, but accidents happen. Although the Lightning Blaze Unicorn is there, he is after all not human, and there would be some things that he would not know how to deal with adequately. Moreover, having a male creature following you around all the time is not something I can come to like. Lu Junyao creased his brows together and contemplated deeply for a moment. I'll get Lu Ji to go back with you to protect you closely instead. Lu Ji. Qingyu blinked her eyes. She seemed to have some recollection of that name. Is it that pretty lady dressed in green clothes back at the fragrance court? She remembered that the lady had stepped up to stop the man who had come to find trouble with her. A rather righteous lady. How could she have known that the lady had stood up for her? Because that lady had fallen for her. Lu Junyao glanced at Qingyu and said in a strange and indiscernible voice, I'm putting her by your side only to have her protect you. As she is also a woman, she can be more thoughtful and conscientious than men in certain things. But there is one important thing you must remember. His words spoke until there he suddenly stopped. Qingyu arched up an eyebrow. Remember what? He suddenly held her dainty pointed chin in his hand, raising her head up to look straight into his face. Thereafter, Lu Junyao leaned in close, and his thin lips parted slightly to say softly, Listen carefully here. You must never do to her like what you did to Lianji before. All that teasing and flirting. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. This little fox had cross-dressed herself for too long, and her actions were sometimes a little too uninhibited, and lacking in restraint, reckless and flirtatious like a man. He had seen it himself once. She was able to make an old hand like Lianji, who had been immersed in a place like Fragrance Court for so many years, look so helpless with her teasing, which surprised him greatly at that time. Hearing the man's words, Qingyu could not help but laugh out loud. But why? Would he be jealous if she teases a woman? Lu Junyao looked at her with a serious expression and said, Because she will fall in love with you. Chapter 223. 2. Dare to seduce people. I'll make you cry. The fact that Lu Ji liked women was something that he had come to hear about before. But besides that slightly unusual preference, she was outstanding in all other areas. Her skills among the top few among the 12 courtesans, and was highly intelligent. That was the reason Lu Junyao was placing Lu Ji by the little lass side. He was naturally confident of Lu Ji's loyalty and her ability to do her duty. But if the lass were to go flirt and seduce the woman, who knew whether anything unexpected could possibly happen? Fall in love with me? Qingyu burst out laughing and fell onto him. Thank you for thinking so highly of me. This is a great testament to the charm I possess, and I am honored. It looked like she thought he was just joking. Lu Junyao's face turned solemn, and he held her shoulder to straighten her body that had doubled over in laughter. He then said in a highly serious tone, pausing in between each word, I am not joking here. Lu Ji likes women. If you dare to really go flirt and tease her recklessly, like you always do to the other women in here, and make her develop feelings for you, you'll see how I am going to deal with you when I come back. Qingyu's face that was laughing dismissively suddenly stiffened up. She likes women. Why does it feel like she has just realized something strange? That day when Lu Ji had stood up for her, didn't she do it out of a sense of righteousness? But it was because she liked women, and was just subconsciously defending her, because she was a girl? And it seemed like the way she looked at her had been rather thought-provoking as well. Qingyu's eyes immediately widened helplessly. Is that really true? Is it something she should be laughing about now? Lu Junyao murmured softly to her. Heed my words. Don't go stir that hornet's nest for no reason. All right. I know already. In order to stop Lu Junyao from nagging any further, Qingyu quickly nodded her head without hesitation. I'll be good. I will not stir up any trouble, and will not let myself get hurt. I will also definitely not go flirt with or tease any men or women. Will this now set your mind at ease enough for you to leave already? He said it was an important matter, but the guy did not seem to be anxious at all. He has dawdled for so long, and if he drags his feet any longer, the sun will set. Her clearly patronizing words, however, sounded very differently when they reached the man's ears. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The devilishly enchanting eyes narrowed dangerously, and his voice was low and deep. Are you chasing me away? Qingyu felt so wrongfully accused, and she really did not know whether to laugh or to cry. I was merely afraid that you would be delayed in your personal matters. I would of course like you to be able to remain here to accompany me, but you've got to look at the bigger picture. The beautiful slender fingers that were tinged with the uniquely faint fragrant scent of herbs felt comfortingly cool, as they slowly came to caress the man's cheek. As if they were imbued with an amazing power, they quelled the displeasure in the man's heart in an instant. Chapter 223. 3. Dare to seduce people. I'll make you cry. In addition to that, the young lady's submissive look really almost killed him. That gentle and pleasing voice spoke such moving words, unknowingly plucking at the strings in the man's heart. The violet orb stared fixedly at the young lady's face of flawless beauty, the fervor of his gaze seeming like it would incinerate her. Qingyu was taken aback by the intensity of his gaze, and wondered if it was because he liked her doing this, which made her want to remove her hand instinctively. It dawned upon her that the action she had grown so used to appease little Bei was being used upon this man before her, one who was highly revered and worshipped, a person used to standing high above everyone else, and such actions could possibly come to offend him. But the instant she tried to move her hand away, her wrist was suddenly tightly held in the man's warm grip. His voice became deep as his gaze looked unblinkingly at her face. Don't move. Just put your hand there, as it's very comforting. Qingyu could not help smiling as she gave in to the man, thinking the way he was acting was a little like a small child, which felt so adorable. Junyao, have you fallen asleep inside? It's been almost 2 hours already. If we do not leave now, are we going to wait till tomorrow? Outside the door, Bai Zhiyan's voice rang out loudly to reach their ears. If this was like the usual situation in the past, it would not matter when they left. But because the mine-free peak was about to appear soon as changes had been seen in Cloud Heaven, they need to enter the dimensional portal before the sea hour in the morning to reach Cloud Heaven in time. Otherwise, fluctuations in the direction of flow in the dimensional tunnel might bring them to another place. With Cloud Heaven being so vast, who knew what kind of a remote and desolate they would end up in? But the most important point was that they would be delayed with their business at hand. Lu Junyao said that he was just going to say goodbye, but had been in the little last room for so long. Seeing that time was already almost up, Bai Zhiyan could not help but to rush him from outside the door. What is that fella up to in there? The heartwarming moment interrupted. Lu Junyao's face turned dark. Looks like Bai Zhiyan would not be able to escape a good thrashing after he goes outside. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You go on now. Be careful out there. Qingyu's hand was still on his face, and just like what he always did, she pinched him a little. Lu Junyao's eyes narrowed slightly, and his hand holding the young lady's wrist tightened a little. He suddenly bent over and leaned his face in close to the young lady, asking in a questioning tone, I am about to leave. Do you want to kiss me goodbye? After having made his feelings clear, he no longer needed to hide his thoughts anymore. In the man's enchanting eyes, they were filled with his love for the person right before him. Having a man whose flawless looks seemed to have been exceptionally loved and blessed by the heavens staring so intently at her, his eyes expectant and hopeful, really just made one want to commit a crime. Qingyu did not speak, but reached her hands out to pull him in close, and pressed her soft lips against the man's thin ones, even biting them lightly. Her actions suddenly caused the man's body to freeze. Chapter 223. 4. Dare to seduce people. I'll make you cry. But that was not all. He had not expected the young lady to be so bold and daring, as he felt a little playful fish slip right into his territory, swimmingly happily inside. The man's body wasn't just frozen in shock at that moment, but almost transformed into a ravenous wolf under the young lady's audacious incitement, as he submissively allowed the young lady to shower him with love for a good while. Qingyu had always been direct and passionate with her feelings. Once her mind was set, she would not be coy and hesitant, so being intimate occasionally was something she liked as well, and it would also improve their relationship. But someone's completely frozen state made it seem like he was shocked and overwhelmed by her actions. After a while, Qingyu finally ended that highly moving kiss, and she looked smilingly at him to ask, satisfied? She had probably been too ferocious just now, as the young lady's petite lips looked a little red and swollen, but that made her look even more captivating, driving someone almost out of his mind. Lu Junyao breathed out heavily as roiling surge rose inside his eyes, almost able to drown a person looking into them. He buried his head into the fair and smooth skin exposed under the collar that had come loose and bite hard onto it. His voice turned hoarse and raspy as he said, "If I did not have to leave right now, I would definitely make this bold and daring little demoness cry. I'll be waiting for you to do that." The expression on Qing Yu's face did not look embarrassed in the slightest at that moment, but she had said those words with a radiant beaming smile on her face. Lu Junyao did not say anything in response as he stood up and just turned around to leave the room. He was afraid that if he still did not leave now, it would become harder and harder for him to do it. What a tormenting little one she is. Did she have to stir up such a scene just before he had to go, making him miss her so much now? But his eyes narrowed as he raised his long fingers up to gently touch his lips. Didn't that kiss from the little one seem too well practiced? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Or did that mean that she had done it with other men before? Regarding that, he would have to find out clearly once he returns. Lu Junyao's lips had always been thin and colorless, with them looking so alluringly red and luscious at that moment. Any fool would be able to jolly well guess what had happened inside the room just now. Bai Zhiyan glanced at the man and said to the man, "What? You took advantage of the lass again? See that lascivious look on your face." Hearing that, Lu Junyao looked at him with violet orbs that were calm without a single ripple in them and said expressionlessly, "She was the one who took advantage of me." Chapter 224. 1. Thank you for being able to love him so much. Bai Zhiyan almost choked on his own saliva upon hearing that remark. He barely just managed to recover from shock as he stared at the man with a complicated look in his eyes, his face filled with doubt. That lass took advantage of you? It really didn't seem possible. The lass always seemed so cold and aloof, like she could not be bothered with him. So how could she possibly do something so out of character all of a sudden today? Lu Junyao scoffed icily, but there was strangely a hint of pride in his eyes as he said, "Why not? She even said that she liked me just now." Bai Zhiyan could not help himself, but feel a chill run through his body when he tried to imagine the scene the man described. Forget it. Don't want to argue with him on this topic any further. We'll know when we verify it with the lass the next time we come back. That's right. Didn't you mention that Antland's soul fragments have all been brought back to the Dark Lands? Why did I not see them? Bai Zhiyan suddenly remembered that, and could not help but ask in puzzlement. Lu Junyao's eyes flashed, and he said nonchalantly, "They have naturally been returned to where they are supposed to go." Speaking of that, he just could not help but be angry. Is that despicable man immediately provoking him the moment he wakes up? All his hard work from before has been usurped by that guy, and taken to gain Antland's favor. But he was not afraid of the guy's petty tricks anymore now. After all, he has the little fox on his side, and compared to a father whom she had never met before, his relationship with her as her intimate lover would naturally mean she loves him more than that guy. To make the little fox acknowledge him, the guy would surely need to put in quite a bit of effort, and maybe at that time, the guy might even have to try to win his favor as well. Thinking about that, the corners of Lu Junyao's mouth curled up, and a meaningful smile came to show on his face. Cloud Heaven. Bright Moon Divine Temple within the rather dimly lit Soul Token Chamber. Tens of thousands light specks glittered like stars in the air, where some shone intensely bright, and some were so dim they looked like they were about to be extinguished anytime. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. The soul tablets in here were separated into two different colors, one type blue, and the other type red. Blue represented the male gender, while red represented female. The intensity of its light reflected the person's lifespan, where the dim and dark soul tablets meant that its owner would not live for very much longer. The Bright Moon Divine Temple had control over the life and death of people in the world, and that was why they were worshipped as deities, as they had the ability to control when someone would die, or to extend a person's life. Of course, all of that called for one to pay the corresponding price. The Bright Moon Temple's Grand Head Priest Song Jian was a handsome-looking man, who did not look to have reached 30 years of age. Chapter 224. 2. Thank you for being able to love him so much. Of course, based on the common lifespan of people in cloud heaven, Song Jian would be at least 300 years old. After all, for one to ascend to the position of head grand priest was not something that could be achieved in a single day and night. At that moment, he was standing in the soul token chamber with his hands behind his back, inspecting the state of each soul tablet. Suddenly, at the highest point among the dense cover of glittering stars, an extremely bright silver speck of light appeared. And not far away from that light speck, a highly unique golden red light had suddenly showed up as well. The intensity of these two specks of light far eclipsed all the other lights shining out from the other soul tablets. What surprised him even more was that these two bright specks were really ludicrous. Since ancient times, never had such a strange phenomenon appeared. These two glowing stars had appeared out of nowhere, without any soul tablets attached to them, as if their destiny was really just too powerful and strong, their greatness so unsuppressible, that they came to appear in the soul token chamber all of a sudden on their own. The shade on Song Jian's face changed drastically, and he was just about to go inform the temple lord, when he suddenly heard the soft voice of a woman behind him, gentle and pleasing to the ear when it reached him. They have appeared after all. Looks like this is all predestined. An inescapable destiny. Temple Lord, what did you just say? Song Jian turned himself around, seeming a little confused as he looked at the swirl of smoky pink silk dress on a flawlessly beautiful figure. A woman looking like a fairy descended from the 9 heavens. The woman was always mysteriously veiled behind that one layer of gauze, where many of the numerous temple disciples have never even seen the temple lord's real countenance, knowing only that their temple lord never liked to meet anyone, always keeping a distance from people behind a layer of gauze. As the head grand priest, Song Jian was one of the temple lord's most trusted aides, and he had naturally seen her in person before, even secretly hiding feelings towards her. But that was a fact that he would naturally not dare to speak of at all. It must be known that although the temple lord was born a ravishing beauty, she hated people to lust for her looks, and had a strong hatred for men. If not for the fact that Song Jian was useful to her, he would definitely not be allowed to remain with the divine temple. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although it was not known why the temple lord hated men so intensely, Song Jing was still very careful to keep his feelings hidden, never once daring to reveal even a hint of what he was thinking. Qing Luoyan lifted the ends of her mouth in a graceful arc, but did not answer his question. She merely looked up and stared at the blindingly brilliant silver light, and murmured softly to herself, "I'm waiting here for you to come back, to exact revenge upon me." The barbarian tribe main encampment. Mo Jingyu, I dare you to say that one more time. In the northern part of the barbarian tribe's main camp, a deafening roar rang out inside the encampment's main tent. Chapter 224. 3. Thank you for being able to love him so much. It was early in the morning here, and some of them had just woken up not too long ago, while others were still lazing in bed, still asleep. Suddenly hearing that voice, they were shocked right out from sleep, unable to react as they froze in astoundment. It was only after a heartbeat that they realized that seemed to have been their chieftain's voice. What happened? Did he have black powder for breakfast to suddenly explode like this? Wonder which unfortunate person could have offended him so much, but though they were curious, no one dared to go ask about it. Their chieftain's temper was really just too terrifying after all, and if they caught him at the wrong time, it was wondered what kind of torment they would face. At that moment on the primary tent, besides the dark and gloomy-faced chieftain of the barbarian tribe, Yin Shu, there were 2 other persons in there. The man was dressed in a white ivory brocade robe, his tall figure leaning back nonchalantly against the back of a chair at the side, his long and narrow beautiful phoenix-like eyes deep set against an exquisitely handsome countenance, looking quite a bit prettier than many young ladies out there. He was every inch a devilishly dashing young master, who could have very well walked out from a painting, devastatingly captivating. And beside him, sat a red-clothed woman. The woman's countenance was also one of rare beauty, a warm gentleness in her eyes, which never once took their gaze off the man. These two people were Mo Jingyu and Qing Lanfei in the flesh. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU faced with Yan Shu's fiery rage. It was as if Mo Jingyu had not seen the man's rage-contorted face, as he said with a nonchalant laugh. I'll say, my brother, we've not seen each other for so long, and I've just barely managed to finally awaken. It could be said that I have just come back to life from the dead. Why do you not seem to have missed me in the slightest, and is instead looking so unhappy here? What damned reason is there to be happy about? Yan Shu could not be bothered with maintaining his dignity, as the chieftain of the tribe at that moment, and just burst out with expletives. That face that was weathered by time seethed with fiery anger, as he stared viciously at the man a moment, before turning his rage-filled eyes onto the red-clothed woman beside the man. He then raised a finger to point at her, and turned back to say to Mo Jingyu, his fury making him pause between each word spat out through tightly clenched teeth. Isn't it enough that you lay half dead for a whole 100 years all because this woman here? Now that you've finally awoken, you want to use the barbarian tribe's forbidden technique to help her find her fragmented soul? Have you lost your mind completely? Seeing Yan Shu staring at his beloved like he was going to eat her up, Mo Jingyu immediately raised an eyebrow and wrapped the woman tightly in a protective embrace. He then said to Yan Shu in a displeased tone, I really just don't understand how Fei Air has come to offend you. Why are you picking on her so much? I'm picking on her. Yan Shu almost lost his mind as he burst out in delirious laughter. He then gritted his teeth tightly together and said, I fear that in these 100 years that you were in a coma, you have forgotten just who was the one who helped you keep the ever-restless and tumultuous barbarian tribe in check, who was the one that helped you protect and care for your flesh body, seeking all ways to help you wake up once again. Despite all that, I have now been made out to be a cold and ruthless evildoer, who is bullheaded and unreasonable. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.